In the war against pirating games, we lose. Back when I was growing up, copy protection was simple. It was a code or a solution to a puzzle in a booklet, like Space Quest 6. You had to build a homing beacon, and the instructions for doing it were in the book. Or Out of This World had a decoder ring inside the book that you needed to solve a puzzle. And it was a good system. You either had to own the game or know someone who owned the game to get past the copy protection. Before the invention of the internet, it was effective. I mean, obviously not 100% effective. I still remember being a kid and my dad coming home with a giant box of floppy disks, and on the little paper sleeve was the code written to unlock the game. And for any of you who are too young to know what I'm talking about, this is a floppy disk. It's what computer games used to come on, and it came in little paper sleeves that look kind of like this. And then devs started having a little fun with copy protection, either in cute little ways that didn't really interfere with your game, like Alan Wake wearing an eye patch, or Game Dev Tycoon, who, if you were playing a pirated game and it detected it, would make the game you were making get pirated more often, and so you would lose money. Or it just made it so the game was really frustrating to play, like in Mirror's Edge. If the game detected you were playing a pirated copy, Faith would slow down before she got to a ledge so you couldn't make a jump. Or Serious Sam 3 would spawn this unkillable boss. And yeah, some of these were annoying, but pirates still found ways to get around them eventually. And these methods didn't really impact the consumer. They only really impacted people who were pirating the game. But I wouldn't call any of them malicious. We got to malicious a little bit later. Like in Spyro, Year of the Dragon. When you got to the final boss of the game would reset and delete your save. Same with Earthbound. If you were playing a pirated copy of Earthbound, one, the game would get a lot harder. It would spawn a lot more enemies. But if you did manage to get through that and get to the end of the game would crash and delete your save. But that kind of seemed to be a theme with the Super Nintendo. Donkey Kong Country 2 and 3 and Kirby's Dream Course also did the same thing. It would do random checks to see if you were playing a pirated game. And if you were, it deleted your games. And these were more punishing because they let you get all the way to the end of the game before punishing you. But this wasn't a problem for your legitimate consumers. It only targeted people who were playing pirated versions of the game. And then we got to the age that most of us are familiar with because it's still going on today. The DRM age. Starforce, Secure ROM, de novo. And this is where legitimate consumers were actually starting to be impacted because these were on every game. All the methods I've talked about up until now, they only affected pirated copies. The game would check to see if you were playing a copy of the game, and then it would implement the issues. But DRM, that affected everybody. Starforce was accused of causing stability issues and crashes. They actually got sued for causing problems to people's systems, but the case was dropped due to lack of evidence. Even though after you uninstalled Starforce, files were still left on your computer that you had to go through special steps to remove. And one of the most famous examples, Spore's DRM only let you install it 3 times. And it became the most pirated game of the year, just so people could get around the secure ROM. Games of Windows Live like Fable 3 and Bulletstorm, as soon as the system wasn't supported anymore, the games became unplayable. De novo got blamed for poor system performance, stuttering, and high CPU usage. And I recently read an article that pretty much every PC game protected by de novo has been cracked by this point anyway, so maybe de novo's on its way out. And all of these really impacted legitimate consumers because they're the ones who had to deal with all the system problems. It actually made a lot of legitimate consumers turn to pirating just to avoid the DRM and all the side effects. When Witcher 2 originally shipped, it had secure ROM, but it was causing so many problems with people's PCs that a lot of people turned to the pirated version just so they wouldn't have to deal with it. And then CD Projekt Red removed the DRM from Witcher 2, and they report that piracy went down and sales went up. This one really hurt consumers, and it's still being used today. But it didn't hurt as much as online authentication. Games that you need to be online to play for the first time, or would do periodic checks online to see if you were using a pirated copy. Games like Red Dead Redemption 2 and Mad Max would check every day or two to see if you were using a pirated copy. Or Wolfenstein New Order and Death Stranding would require a check the first time you played the game. Activision has said that all of their games are going to start doing periodic checks online, and that leads to issues like Might and Magic Legacy. Ubisoft shut down their authentication servers and the game became unplayable. And obviously pirates figure out ways around this, but legitimate consumers who don't have internet or don't have a steady internet are the only ones who get hurt. In fact, PlayStation just put out an announcement that from now on, anything that you buy from their store digitally will need to be checked every 30 days with an online connection, or the license will expire and the game will refuse to launch until you can get back online. Hey, editor, Mischief here. So there seems to be some confusion or new information about how the whole PlayStation 30-day thing works. So the way that it used to work is you would buy a game on the PlayStation Network, you would get a permanent license to play that game offline, provided you were playing on your home console. And the way it works now is if you buy a game on the PlayStation Network, you get a provisional license for 30 days of offline play, which takes you to the end of the refund period. After the refund period, starting at the 15-day mark, you get a permanent license for offline play if you've signed on to the network. Otherwise, if you don't sign into the network after 30 days, then you won't be able to play the game until you sign in online. Then you get the license back. So the only change that's happening is that you used to immediately get a permanent license to play the game, and now you get a provisional license to play the game. And after the refund period, you have to sign into the PlayStation Network once within 30 days, and then you'll get a permanent license, which is a whole other thing that pisses me off about video games now, because it used to be you would just buy a game and then you would own it, and now companies are saying you're only buying a license that allows you to play their game, and they can revoke that license whenever they want, which is just more modern technology bull. But that is a discussion for another video. Back to this video, which brings us to the worst copy protection and the one that we're still dealing with now. Always online and kernel level. Diablo 3 caught a ton of heat when it was announced their game would need to be constantly online. Same with SimCity 2013, a single-player offline game that required a constant internet connection. And because that one came out in the early days of Uplay, whenever the servers went down, it meant the game was unplayable. And of course, EA's response to this was that the game had to always be online for whatever made-up reason they said. I don't remember anymore, something about quality of game, which you didn't hear much about when they later on removed the only on requirement. Or games like The Division or Rainbow Six, Hitman 3, that would save your games or your progress server side, so you needed to have an online connection to the server to progress in the game. The war against game piracy is an unending and vicious cycle. People pirate games, so developers figure out a way to stop them from pirating games or making it more difficult for them to pirate games. The pirates figure out a way around it, so the methods become worse and more intrusive and more harmful. And at every single step, the pirates figure out a way around it. But the legitimate consumers are the ones stuck dealing with this. The people who legitimately buy the game are the ones dealing with these problems the most and the longest. And it makes some of those people turn to pirating just to avoid the problems that these anti-piracy measures cause. And since more people are pirating the game, the devs come up with more and more elaborate ways to prevent it, which sends more people to pirated versions. And I've heard some of the excuses. Well, if games weren't so expensive, people wouldn't pirate them. Well, if the game is good enough, then people will want to pay for it. But let's be honest. There are people who pirate games just because they don't want to pay for them. Not everybody, but there will always be people who pirate games just because they want to. So what's the answer? I think we have to go back to methods that didn't hurt legitimate consumers, but only targeted pirates. Go back to the Earthbound and Spyro days. Let people play the game, get all the way to the end, and then punish them. And yes, word will get out and patches will be released and pirates will figure out a way around it. But game crackers and pirates always figure out a way around it. You are not going to stop game pirating. You're just not. But the answer isn't punishing legitimate buyers. Though I also think another problem is that video games have gone kind of the way of movies, where games take years to make and millions of dollars, and then you have to charge a ridiculous amount just to buy them. I think it would be much better if we went back to shorter development times and shorter games and lower prices. But every game now wants to be a AAA blockbuster multi-million dollar seller. But that's an entire conversation for a different video. My point is, in the war on piracy, you're not hurting the pirates, you're not hurting the crackers. Only people who really get hurt are the legitimate buyers. See you next time.